Hello everyone and welcome to Poser's Full Movie Recaps. Our today's film is about a series of unfortunate events that leads to unlocking the hidden abilities of an ordinary man named Paul Carpenter. It all begins when a clueless elderly man is lured inside a massive room looking for his baby pet dragon. After he finds his dragon, someone speaks and says that, who closes the door, owns the door, so the old man blasted the door with energy, but it shuts already. On the other hand, Paul encounters a series of unfortunate events on the day of his job interview in a London cafe. He missed his alarm, his dress pants have a stain, his shoelace breaks, the toaster malfunctions, he steps on a gum, and his supposed way is blocked. Finally, he reaches the building where the applicants fall in line when a strange man named Monty approaches him. Monty talks as if he knows him but Paul doesn't recognize the man. Paul walks back to the applicants' line, but a dog bites his scarf and runs off. Paul chases the dog to get his scarf back, which leads him into an empty alley where he finds an establishment that is currently hiring. When he finds no one outside, Paul enters the building and finds a woman named Sophie sitting inside. He approaches her and asks about the job interview, but the woman snobs him so he sits on the couch. A few moments later, a company employee calls for his name, and Paul is shocked to realize that the man knows him, even if he never has a chance to give his name yet. The man introduces himself as Dennis Tanner, who apologizes for the renovation inconvenience. And he leads Paul inside a conference room where the board members and CEO Humphrey Wells are waiting for him. Humphrey greets him warmly while Countess Judy of the board asks him to tell them something about himself. Nothing really stands out among the qualifications he mentions, so the woman asks Paul what makes him suited for the vacant position. Since Paul doesn't even know the position he's applying for, he just tells them that it might be pure coincidence that leads him to apply. Surprisingly, this gets the attention of the rest of the interviewers, so Paul relays the series of unfortunate coincidences this morning. Another woman named Van Spee asks about his hobbies, while the others ask some random questions. When a guy named Casimir asks him in German, Paul fails to understand the question and gets distracted by something that grabs his attention. When Humphrey notices Paul's distraction, he asks him what he's looking at, and he tells him that the wallpaper cracks resemble the map of London. He then proceeds to specify some places he can comprehend from the cracks and tells them about the Tube, Hyde Park, and the M25. He adds that as soon as you see it, you really can't unsee it, like some kind of magic thing. That's the time that Dennis ends the interview and leads him outside. At home, his roommate Neville informs Paul that he's moving out, which causes them to bicker since Paul can't pay the rent alone, due to being unemployed. The two get startled when a letter suddenly falls from the door, which is inserted by a monster-like hand. Neville grabs it and informs Paul that it's from J.W. Wells & Co., where they discover that he gets accepted as a paid intern at the firm. The next day, everything goes well and he arrives at work on time, bewildered by the newly renovated building. Rosie the receptionist greets him harshly and tells Paul that this is his last chance to change his mind. She then calls her immediate boss Dennis, who calls her mom, and when Paul asks about the job description, she just hands her a mug of coffee which states, "Destined to be average." Suddenly, Dennis walks down the stairs and mentions his disappointment upon seeing Paul, and adds that interns report only to him. While walking in the hallway, he abruptly stops upon seeing a stapler in their way, and cautiously walks around it. He tours Paul in different departments but didn't really care if the intern follows his explanations. Strangely, Paul sees Monty among the employees, but Dennis quickly pulls him into another room before he can greet the man. Paul cannot really comprehend what the company does, and the only thing that Dennis gives emphasis on is that all interns should leave at exactly 5 o'clock. He even insults Paul for being the lowest of the lowest among all employees and leads him to another room where Sophie, another intern, works. Not really knowing what his job entails, Paul starts blubbering at Sophie, but the woman cuts him off and tells him that she hates the smell of coffee. While Sophie still ignores him, Paul gets startled upon seeing a baby dragon in the corner, but the woman doesn't seem to see it. Rosie walks inside the room and asks if anyone sees a baby dragon. When Paul's expression shows that he likely sees one, Rosie assigns him to mark those places on the map containing bauxite, a mineral used to make aluminum, and Sophie should assist him. Sophie seems offended for being an assistant of someone lower than her, and emphasizes that she's from the fast-track program, which means that they will not work together for long, and the two start to work but find nothing on the map. Paul invites her to lunch, but the woman just ignores him and comments that she wants a cup of coffee, which confused Paul since she hates it. Countess Judy approaches Sophie to assist her with something and adds that Paul can accompany them. The trio walks outside and a canister pops from a manhole, and the Countess reads the note inside. She points out a woman named Delia who is currently reading a novel, and instructs Sophie to signal her if the novel character Cecilia falls into the fountain. The two in turn stands far from Delia and Paul realizes that Sophie can read what Delia reads even from afar. Not long after, Sophie signals the Countess who uses magic to make a man falls into the fountain. Delia immediately rushes to help the man and Judy praises Sophie for a job well done. She reveals that the man's parents paid a fortune for that to happen, because those two are destined to be together, and their bizarre coincidence will be a story to share with their grandchildren. It is also revealed that Sophie is a special kind of seer, and their department controls the client's instinct to influence them in the right direction. Judy takes Sophie with her for more clients, so Paul returns to the dingy office alone. While eating his sandwich, some crumbs fall on the map and he wipes it with his hand. Suddenly, he hears a soft electricity buzz from his hand, and that is when Humphrey appears and instructs him to broaden his reach into the horizon, while hovering his hand at the map. A strike of electricity hits a place from the map, and when he is about to mark the point, the CEO drags him into his office while explaining what they do at the company. He explains that the firm controls human instincts to change something for a better path, but he also expresses his bitterness from not getting any benefits from it. Inside the office, Humphrey shares their failed project called Fine Print, the most audacious influence campaign that they had. But the project hits a snag and tells Paul that he can be the key to help revive the said project since he's a diviner. Paul is confused because he absolutely has no idea what a diviner is, and the CEO didn't even elaborate on its meaning. Humphrey comments that Paul's parents must have been proud of him, but Dennis interjects that his parents don't even know he's alive since they are too busy messing with their own lives. The CEO then shares that his own father was an evil man, who forces him to make a contract when he was young, which states that he will never betray his father or his dad will take his soul. The said contract has been kept in his pocket, to always remind him of his promise, which forces him to keep silent and become an obedient son. He assigns Paul to look for his lost valuable possession, which can disguise itself and can refuse to be found. It is a portable door crucial for Project Fine Print located somewhere inside the building, but Paul can't tell anyone about it and he has to pretend that he's not looking for it. After he leaves the office, Paul starts touching the wall to look for the door, when Van Spee appears and asks what he is doing. Since he needs to keep his mission a secret, Paul keeps quiet about the door even when the woman insists on reporting to her if he notices anything illegal. He gets distracted when the woman's hair starts to form the word beware, and before she leaves, she reminds him that it is time to go home. Unknown to everyone, a door opens and shuts before it disappears somewhere inside the building. Later, Paul abruptly wakes when Casimir suddenly appears inside his bedroom. The board member questions Paul about the job Humphrey has assigned him, but Paul lies to the man. To be able to force him to tell the truth, he bends his feet, makes his teeth fall, and enlarges his ears. In fear, he divulges his mission of finding the portable door, and everything instantly goes back to normal. Paul asks why Humphrey wants the portable door badly, and Casimir just tells him that there's only one way to the banks of the dead, which confuses him more. The next day, Sophie sees Rosie kissing the stapler that Dennis avoids, while Paul continues searching for the portable door. In a hallway, he finds a sign made of staple wire pointing to the banks of the dead, so he follows its direction. In a secluded area, he sees another sign on a door saying, "For goblins only," and discovers a closet. Dennis arrives and scolds him that he does not have permission to enter the area, and urges the intern to give up now since Humphrey will punish him for failure. Somewhere else, the Countess receives another canister from the manhole, and she explains to Sophie that the goblins work with them because they are obsessed with meddling with human affairs, which is convenient for setting up coincidences. She further explains that the company is on edge ever since Humphrey's father, John Wells, mysteriously vanishes at the same time that Dennis's father Arthur disappears. She suspects that those two sons are up to something and that hiring Paul is somehow connected. Sophie depends that Paul might be unaware of the real reason he's been hired, and Judy comments that she seems battling two instincts inside. While Paul continues his mission, he accidentally hears Sophie and Dennis arguing about the woman's confusion of things, because ever since she signs the contract to Wells' firm, she keeps having contradicting opinions of stuff. Paul goes in to try to intervene, but the boss just sends them to leave since it's already 5 o'clock. On the way out, Sophie expresses that she might consider leaving the job when she suddenly sees some licorice candy that she previously hates, but now she's craving for it. While chomping the candy, she retches, so Paul invites her for a drink. At the restaurant, Sophie feels miserable for wanting something that she used to hate, which Paul agrees, but the woman suddenly takes it as an offense. She starts insulting her fellow intern when she suddenly realizes that he's not doing nothing anymore. Sophie tries to ask about his task, but Paul just denies it and kept it a secret. She then warns him about Humphrey and tells him about his missing father, but Paul, feeling defensive, comments that she's just jealous because the CEO chose him for a task instead of her. This leads her to spout more insults and emphasize that he just got a job because the boss doesn't know what to do with him. After an awkward silence, Paul goes back to the office on the next day where Rosie mocks him on his failed date. He quickly heads to the goblin's closet, but Monty blocks him along the way and asks him not to go to the basement. This piques the intern's curiosity since he only knows that it heads to the closet instead of the basement. Monty pleads with Paul to keep his tongue slips a secret to Dennis, and he negotiates that he will keep Monty's secret if he let him pass. Paul investigates the closet and discovers a secret passage to the basement. He gets amazed by the unnatural things and mystical creatures inside and sees the stapler again. He tries to touch it, but a goblin appears and directs him to go somewhere, which increases the buzzing in his hands. He follows his instincts and hovers his hand around when finally, Paul finds the portable door, and when it opens, he enters the door and finds himself at the entrance of Humphrey's office. The portable door behind him turns into a towel when closed, and he overhears the CEO's nefarious plans to control people's instincts. He also sees Sophie's image in front of the clients while being asked about the things she hates. Humphrey explains that after the interview, they are able to influence Sophie's instincts and change her preferences. After hearing about those evil plans, Paul looks at his employee's ID and notices the hidden camera. He panics and tries to summon the door through the towel, but the towel stays as a towel when Paul notices the instruction to say, "Knock knock." He follows the instruction and the magical door appears, which he quickly enters, and ends up inside a freezer in a supermarket. He grabs the towel and returns to the office to warn Sophie, but is shocked when she initiates to reconcile, which he quickly accepts. He then grabs her employee ID and throws it outside, and explains that the company is filming and controlling them. He shows the towel and summons the door, but the door leads them to the massive room with the elderly man at the beginning of the film. They hear a voice begging them to wait, but the two get scared and quickly rush back and close the door. Paul reads an additional instruction on the towel's tag, which tells the user to announce their destination before opening the door. He then proceeds to try again and announces his flat, and the two enter his apartment. Sophie gets excited about the new discovery, and even when Paul tries to explain the CEO's wicked plan, she ignores him and just pulls him to places she wants to explore. For a time, the two enjoy the moments and visit the sites around the world, while keeping it a secret by continuing their regular jobs. The two become closer and Paul suggests that they run away together, but Sophie confesses that even though she likes him, she cannot make a decision because she doesn't recognize herself anymore due to her job contract. The two decide to destroy the contract, so they can figure out what she really feels. Back at their gloomy office, Dennis barges in and notices their beach attire and the sand on the floor. When he realizes that Paul is in possession of the door, he desperately warns them to just leave the door at Wells and walk away to never come back. After Dennis leaves, Sophie tells Paul that she agrees to leave, but the diviner insists to retrieve her contract. Later, the two ask the door to get to Humphrey's office, but the door brings them to the printing room instead. Paul gets startled when he sees the stapler on the floor, but when he looks again, it's gone. Sophie reads some of the contracts being printed and notices that they are from random establishments like a gym membership or train tickets. Paul sees the stapler again and it leads to another random room where a shadow lurks. They enter the room and hear strange grunts and snarling inside, so they open another door where the noise comes and finds nothing but a small fire inside. Paul uses the portable door to go to the CEO's office, but again the door leads them somewhere else, which is a one-way entrance to the Bank of the Dead. Sophie reads the fine print on the contract that she found earlier and discovers that Humphrey uses various clauses to deceive people into signing their souls to him, which grants him complete control of their instincts. Upon realizing that the CEO steals Sophie's soul, they continue their investigation and find a group of goblins. Scared, the two run away and escape through a door, when Dennis suddenly appears and berates them for staying after office hours. Paul notices that his boss is one of the goblins, who reveals that he's been looking out for Paul's wellness this whole time, and demands to hand him the portable door. All of a sudden, Humphrey appears and tries to exert dominance, but Dennis tells him that it is after office hours, so it means that he is in charge. Humphrey argues that he's the one supplying the clan with all their resource, therefore the goblins should submit to him, and turn some of the goblins into office equipment, meaning that the stapler is in fact one of the goblins. While the two bosses are busy with their arguments, Paul and Sophie try to escape through the portable door, but before she can say their destination, Humphrey commands them to stop talking. Because of this, the two fall into an unknown destination, which is the same massive room the old man enters in the beginning. Before the door closes, the CEO whispers, "Who closes the door keeps the door," before shutting it up. A moment later, they hear the old man asks if they have the door, but when they answer no, he goes back to reading his book. The massive room contains an endless door and they insist on asking for a way out. But the old man explains that they are currently in the nether and there's no way out. Paul figures that the old man is in fact John Wells, and mentions his son's contract. But John answers that the contract is useless if he cannot bring it to the Bank of the Dead. Back at the office, Humphrey commands the goblins to start transporting all the contracts to the Bank of the Dead through the portable door. Paul persists in looking for a way out, but no matter what door he enters, he always ends up in the nether. He then tries using the buzzing in his hands to find a usable door, and when he finally sees one, he calls his companion and exits into the front of the office building. John jumps up and down to celebrate his freedom, and tells Paul that he might be more than a diviner but refused to elaborate on that. When they go inside, Rosie is elated to see John alive but informs him that he might be too late. John gives Humphrey's contract to Paul and accompanies them to the Bank of the Dead while instructing Rosie to get her husband. The trio sneaks into the basement to look for the portable door and witness the goblins transporting millions of contracts. John instructs the intern to focus on depositing Humphrey's contract to the bank, but the CEO found their hiding place and tries to blast them away. The father and son fight using energy blasts and magic, while Paul and Sophie rush to enter the bank. Unfortunately, the goblins try to stop them due to the CEO's command, even though Dennis demands they let Paul go. Desperate, Sophie tries to contact Countess Judy through telepathy, but a goblin interrupts and caught Paul in a net. Suddenly, Rosie arrives holding the stapler and yells that it is Arthur, Dennis's father. She throws the stapler and John quickly shoots it with his magic, and the stapler transforms into Arthur, the goblin leader. He immediately commands all the goblins to stop, and Rosie happily runs to her husband who transforms into her goblin form. Dennis tries to welcome his father, but Arthur isn't thrilled with his son. That's when Humphrey corners John while he's distracted with the reunion, so Paul tries to run into the bank, but he blasted him before he can enter the door. The board member arrives and pleads for Humphrey to stop, but the CEO is defiant and intends to continue his nefarious plans. He petrifies Sophie and demands to Paul to hand him his contract. But before Paul can approach the CEO, Sophie talks to him through telepathy stating that what if Paul was able to create a door, instead of finding one. She encourages him to explore his power by creating a door to the bank, and that's what Paul did and he soon falls through the door. Paul finds himself inside the bank while the teller calls in the next client. Paul approaches the teller to hand her Humphrey's contract, but before she can put a stamp on the paper, he interrupts and proposes a trade. Back in the real world, Humphrey suddenly loses his powers, so the three board members rush to John and help him. The old wizard petrifies his son and instructs Sophie to open the door to the nether, and directs the CEO inside while he pleads to him for mercy. The goblin celebrates as soon the door closes, and John takes the towel and rips the tag, explaining that the door will have to stay closed forever. Sophie asks how Paul can return when suddenly a door appears and the diviner walks out. She rushes to him and the two embrace each other, and Paul reveals that he got her contract. She realizes that what she currently feels is free will, and gives Paul a kiss while everyone cheers. When the couple exits the building, Paul throws the towel into the laundry truck and the film ends with the two of them being officially part of the company, while a housekeeper holds the towel with Wells' label and says, "Knock knock." Did you enjoy today's movie recap? Write your comments down below.